Ladies and gentlemen and colleagues, good evening. So, how do I do, John? I don't even see you. There you are. Okay. All right. Chinese is a little rusty. I left China in 2015. I was there for 10 years, from 05 to 15. I went back once in 18, and then COVID came, so I haven't been back since. But I actually first went to China in 1995. So, and I worked there really, so it's been 30, my life has had a 30-year involvement with China. It's a wonderful country, wonderful people. I'm going to talk about the competition with China, but I want to emphasize that I have many, many Chinese friends, and I have great respect for the Chinese people as we go through this today. This is the Great Decisions book, and this is the kickoff article about China. And I was really puzzled by the picture they used. I don't know if you can see this here, that they talk about border patrol in Altai and Xinjiang. Now, Xinjiang is a province in far northwestern China, and Altai is a city at the edge of the Altai Mountains, which border between Mongolia and China. It's a beautiful area, and Joan and I visited there in 2012. My lawyer, who was a corporate attorney, her MBA class had a tour of Xinjiang, and we persuaded them to take us along. So it was about 8 Chinese people and my son and Joan, so with 3 foreigners. The whole thing was in China, and we went to this area. It's just extraordinarily beautiful. And it is a sensitive area because it's on the border with 4 countries: China, Russia, Kazakhstan, and Mongolia. So this is a map of China. And you can see here that, I just want to show you where it is. That's where Altai is. Can you see that on the map? That's in the far northwest. Mm-hmm. And if you head north there, right where all the countries come together, we were actually there, which is just an extraordinarily beautiful area. And our colleagues had a tour of the frontier. We were not allowed to go because we had American passports. So we had a wonderful day touring a very extraordinarily scenic area, and very difficult to get to travel-wise and also security-wise. So it was interesting. So I thought I was surprised to see that in this book here. My first time to China was 30 years ago, almost exactly, 31 years ago, in March 1995. My company wanted to set up a joint venture in China. So at that time, it wasn't so easy to get to places in China. We took a plane from Chicago to Tokyo, and then we arrived the next day in the afternoon in Tokyo. And that evening we arrived in Beijing. And our salesman met us. He took us to the hotel. There was only one Western hotel in the city at that time in Beijing. It was called the Great Wall Sheraton. It was a Sino-American joint venture. At that time, joint ventures could only, anybody who wanted to do a business in China had to do it as a joint venture. Later on they had what they called WFOEs, wholly owned foreign enterprises. But in the early years it was joint ventures, really so the Chinese could participate and learn the technology, and this is really how the growth in China started. And the reason I wanted to start my talk off talking about 30 years ago is I was putting this together, just kind of astounded by the growth that has occurred over the last 30 years and how things have changed during that time. So our salesman said to me, he's from Taiwan, where you're going tomorrow, a city called Peningshan, the conditions are really, really primitive. So clean out your bathroom of all the soap and shampoo, because there's none where you're going. The conditions were very, very basic. And so the next morning, we flew to Zhengzhou in Henan province. Henan province is the breadbasket of China. It's also one of the most populous provinces. Today, at that time, Zhengzhou was just a dilapidated city. Today, it's where Apple makes all their iPhones. They used to make them on the coast, but they moved the factory inside the country. It's in Zhengzhou. It's one of their principal production centers. We got off the plane, and they took us to a quick lunch, and then we drove about 70 miles, which took somewhere between 4 and 6 hours. I made the trip many times, down a road that had ox carts, horse carts, push carts, bicycles, and everything in between, from the prehistoric, from the Stone Age to the contemporary modern China, modern events. We were driving in in a black sedan, probably a Mercedes, and they would take zigzag around all this stuff on the road. The road was just unbelievable. And that all changed. Now the trip is, by the time I left China, the trip was only an hour. So we went to Zhengzhou, and this is what we saw when we got to Pindingshan. When we arrived in the city of Pindingshan, which is where we were setting up a joint venture with the South Milwaukee plant. And I put this picture in here because when I look at my photos, I'm always astounded by the way people's faces looked. And you can see here, no one is smiling. And that was what it was like in China. Everybody was really grim. It was really, people were struggling for their existence at that time. And this was a coal mining town. There's a very thick haze all over the city. Things were not so good in those days, nothing like they are today. This was our joint venture partner had set aside this workshop. So it was from this workshop that our South Milwaukee product was supposed to be built here, and we were going to conquer the entire Chinese market. I'm being a little sarcastic, but this is what it looked like. And this is how things changed. This is the original Pindingshan factory that was set aside by our partner, who was we were designated to use them by the Chinese government. They would pick big state-owned enterprises and tell American and European corporations, this is who you will work with to get into the China market. That's how it all started. They wanted to learn from us, we wanted to learn from them. And what they did to us is every night they wined and dined us. And this is a very typical Chinese banquet. They had a lazy Susan filled with the most extraordinary food and supplying us with alcohol. The red wine was called the Great Wall red wine. And the stuff in the white pitcher is called Baijiu. It's about a 60% alcohol, about 120 proof alcohol. And this is what they toast you with, those little glasses. You can see these little glasses. Whoops, what did I do? Okay, wrong one. Right here. Not working. Okay. Right there. There's tiny little cups. Like a thimbleful, they'd fill them up with this baijiu, and they toast you, and you have to drink it. And people would go around and each sit with the guest and toast him, and then another person would come. So they were only having one drink, and we were having so many. And I was the target because I was the senior guy at that time. And it's lucky my liver survived living in China for 10 years and visiting it over a 20-year period. But the food is fantastic. You can't find anything like it here. So that was my first encounter with China 30 years ago. As I was putting this talk together, I was trying to digest this very, very serious article in this book talking about the relationships between China and the United States, starting with Trump 1.0, and then going to Biden, and then going to Trump 2.0, speculating on what the future relationships would be between the United States and China. And I put this presentation together a couple times, and finally I decided that really there's three areas of contention that it could be between the United States and China. We could break down our relationship into these three buckets. The first being economic and trade imbalances, the second being military spheres of influence, and the third being Taiwan. So I think these are the three main issues that I'm going to talk about tonight. And as I put everything together in this book, I finally realized I could drop everything into one of these three buckets. And maybe it'd be a little less confusing. My wife was confused when I tested this presentation out on her initially, so I tried to simplify it so you'd understand it tonight. So when I was wandering around China in the late 90s, trying to understand the market, and I realized it'd be very difficult to set up a business to sell stuff in China. That was a long-term play, which ultimately we succeeded at. But I realized that the big opportunity that people were looking at trying to export from China. And everyone was talking about China joining the WTO, the World Trade Organization. There was a lot of discussion about, everybody's very excited about getting into the World Trade Organization. That was really the transformative event that totally disrupted the world economy. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. China became quickly clear to me and to many others that the real opportunity in China was not selling in China to the Chinese. Everybody talked about this billion-person market. That was not the real opportunity. The real opportunity was for Walmart to go have their shoes made in Wenzhou in China and fill their stores with shoes made in China. Companies like my company saying outsourcing parts that were machined rather than machining them in the United States, having them machined in China and brought back. So everybody was looking at different kinds of sourcing, and the term became in industry low-cost country sourcing. And we were assigned metrics of how much product we imported from China to build up that we could reduce our cost of sales. And all the companies were doing this, so it became very necessary to be competitive. And Walmart filled their whole stores with everything in the store just about was made in China. And we as consumers liked it because we got good quality at lower prices. So low-cost country sourcing, the government focused on incentives to bring companies to China to manufacture in China. They provided a very good, hard-working labor force, almost an infinite supply of labor that just wanted to work all the time. And they provided extensive infrastructure development. One of the early words I learned was kaifachu, which was development zone. Everything was like special industrial zone, was the kaifachu. So the whole issue was low-cost country sourcing was transformative, and this is what happened. So China joined the World Trade Organization. You can see here, they joined it in December of 2001. And look at the exponential growth of their economy. So that little crummy workshop to what's happened in the last 25 years. It's just astounding. I mean, 17-time growth from what it was when this all started out. But this has had a big effect on the world economy. And you can see it right here. It's had a big effect on the United States because we are buying a heck of a lot from China, a heck of a lot more than we are selling to China. And this is really the theme of the talk. Suddenly it becomes a political problem for our leaders. We have unhappy workforce that's being laid off because the work has been moved to China. We have happy consumers, but we have unhappy workers. I'd be meeting with workers and they would complain about us buying stuff that was imported in our manufacturing, and I'd say to them, do you ever go to Walmart? Oh yeah, I go there all the time. Well, if you look where the stuff's made. So this created a lot of pressure on our society, and this is why different presidents have been trying different means to manage this imbalance in trade. And this is an imbalance not only with the United States, but with the entire world. And this is much of this book is about dealing with this trade deficit. China just invested in an enormous capacity. This is a shipyard in Yangzhou. I've been there. We actually supplied some electrical switchgear for that in my later years in China. But they have built these massive shipyards, massive factories, not for their own economy. This is to export stuff to the world. They are just focused on exporting. We'll talk about why that's important in the next couple slides. And so they're putting infrastructure in like we don't even have anything close to it now. We have the old Philadelphia Navy Yard, or we have a small Navy Yard up in Marinette, Wisconsin. We don't have anything of this scale left in the United States. It's scary, but that's what's happening. So this is a very recent article from the Financial Times. Why is China doubling down on its export-led growth? And the key thing here, if you can see this, is the country has plans to reinforce its dominance in global manufacturing despite persistent inflation at home and rising tensions abroad. I don't completely agree with the wording of this thing, this caption. I would say because of persistent deflation at home, the prices keep going lower and lower in the Chinese market. This is why it's so difficult to sell products in China to Chinese consumers, because it's so competitive. There might be 100 people bidding on one, in a tender. There might be 100 different companies bidding, and they keep pushing the prices down. And to figure out how to do business in this environment, which I had to do, is very, very challenging. So everybody in China wants to export because they can get higher prices outside of China than they can get inside of China. So this persistent deflation. I had one boss tell me, China's exporting deflation to the world. And we were measured on how much we could drive down our costs. And the only way to do it was to get stuff from China. So this process is continuing because China is afraid that if they don't have work for all their people, they're going to have social upheaval. So the deflation is a big worry for the government. And their solution is to export more and more. And this creates all this tension with Germany, with the United States, and so on and so on. China has been pressured by the United States and others to find other markets. And China set up recently what's called the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. And it's an agreement between a number of countries in the Asia-Pacific basin. It's a trade agreement, much like NAFTA that we have in this country. We had originally promoted at the end of the Obama administration, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Hillary Clinton was a big advocate of this, and I talked about this in one of my last talk when I was here. And when Trump came into power, he canceled the TPP. Well, this replaced the TPP, and the only big Pacific nation missing from this agreement is us. We're not in it. We're not part of this. So we've kind of walked away from a lot of business. Our solution, our president came to power last year, as you know, and he came in with the idea of Liberation Day tariffs, and he imposed tariffs on many different nations. Nations maybe only had penguins on their island, or countries you never heard of or never went to, but everybody got tariffs imposed on them. And that was his solution, which was kind of isolating the United States in the world. And he really hit China hard with tariffs. He was going to teach them a lesson. But I think things didn't go as planned, because China immediately halted purchases of soybeans, which really hurt our Midwest farmers. Wisconsin farmers, Iowa, Minnesota, all these people were hurt by this by the blockade on our embargo on buying soybeans from the United States. All the business was shifted to Brazil and Argentina, and it still hasn't been resolved. There was a farm aid bill that didn't even cover a fraction of the sales that were lost from the Chinese embargo on our stuff. So that was one of their first areas of retaliation. The second area that they did, I don't think that the Trump administration was prepared for, was they halted exports of valuable rare earth minerals. Now, these rare earth minerals they're used in magnets, for example. We're not really aware of them, but they permeate our economy. And here's a better slide showing you where they are. The Chinese have a monopoly on production of rare earth minerals. Apparently, it's not that hard to produce these various minerals, but they're ecologically unfriendly. They're environmentally unfriendly, mining these things. And China invested the money to do this, and they have a monopoly on rare earth minerals, and they immediately embargoed shipments of rare earth minerals to the United States. This is very, very painful. This war we're fighting now in the Persian Gulf could not be fought without rare earth minerals like the magnets. So you see here, these are some of, they're using catalytic converters, industrial scrubbers, chemical processing, they're using metallurgy, they're using ceramics, magnets, they're using our iPhones, they're using all kinds of electronics and radars and things like that. So this really was painful. They got us where it really hurts. And people became, the United States and everybody else started looking for alternative suppliers for rare earth minerals. I don't know if you remember Trump lecturing the president of Ukraine, Mr. Zelensky. He was telling him, you don't have any cards. I think the Chinese could give Trump the same lecture because they were holding the cards. They were just waiting for him to do this. He really walked right into a trap. Well, meanwhile, all our allies started looking elsewhere. So one by one, all the major allies of the United States started visiting China to set up their own trade agreements with China and bypass the United States. So this is Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada. He went there and negotiated an agreement to export canola oil products from Canada to China, and in turn he agreed to set up a joint venture in Canada to manufacture Chinese electric vehicles for the North American market. Well, this is a real shot at President Trump because Canada and the United States auto industries are intertwined, and some of the moves Trump did really hurt the American auto industry. So, you know, I don't know how it's going to ultimately play out, but this was our president was not pleased when Carney went and did this. Macron, the president of France, went to China, made his own deal with Xi Jinping on French products. There's a lot of French wine, for example, consumed in China. This is a picture of Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister of England. This is in Shanghai. That's the UN Gardens in Shanghai, kind of a tourist area in downtown Shanghai. And he was there making his own deal. And finally, last week, Merz, the Chancellor of Germany, was in Beijing. This week, he was meeting with Trump. And one of the companies that has been very successful exporting to China is Germany, because of their expertise in machining parts. And they were selling a lot of stuff to China, but their exports have gone down as the Chinese have developed the capability to do it themselves. Meanwhile, the car industry, the Chinese loved the German cars. In my early years, everybody had an Audi or Mercedes or something, and they were driving them around, or a fancy Volkswagen. But now Chinese are switching to electric vehicles in the German sphere. That China's going to flood the European market with electric vehicles, because the Chinese have a lead on that over all the world manufacturers. So the whole world economy is turning upside down as they steadily progress, and we zigzag on whatever our policy is going to be. This graph, this chart, is taken right out of this book from November. So everything I'm going to say about tariffs is obsolete, because this book was written in November. I tried to update it with what was going on, and it kept changing, and it keeps changing. I don't really know how it's going to shake out with the Supreme Court latest ruling, but you can see what happened is that the first bar is the tariffs under Trump 1. This is the tariff on steel under Trump 2, on Biden, and this is the tariff under Trump 2.0. So this is as of November by different commodities: steel, aluminum, solar panels, washing machines, electric vehicles, and semiconductors. So we were slapping tariffs on. For the most part, Biden did not take away from did not cancel the Trump tariffs. He went with them, and Trump continued and increased some of them kind of in an erratic fashion. And it's still, as I said, a very dynamic situation how it's going. These tariffs really hurt, because they are a tax on commodities that we use. Someone's going to have to pay the tax. In this case, our own Harley Davidson. There's not much more. A motorcycle is mostly aluminum and steel. All that steel and aluminum is imported, much of it either from Canada or from overseas. And this created a $67 million charge to their fourth quarter earnings that they just recently reported. So this is a very painful thing, and all manufacturers are feeling this. I don't think there's going to be any sorrow about if they can rid the country of these tariffs. It's definitely a major cost drag on our manufacturing economy. Again, it's hurting our own competitiveness. We're hurting ourselves, not the Chinese or not the Canadians or whoever it is. So that's an economic issue, quick survey. Now let's talk about the military spheres of influence. And this is the second area that I think we can look at as between China and the United States. And I've talked about this, a variety of these maps in the past, but geopolitical strategists talk about the first island chain, which are islands stretching from Japan past Taiwan through the northern Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, and China has claimed all the area within that first island chain in the South China Sea, that this is Chinese territory. And at first no one took it too seriously. The original maps for this actually are not from the Communist China. The original maps were in 1910 by when the nationalist government was just emerging in China. They drew maps with what was called, which eventually became called the 9-dash lines. 100 years later, in 2010, the Chinese started publishing passports. Their tourists going to visit Vietnam or some other country with a map of 9-dash lines along here that they claimed was Chinese territory. And everybody was furious about that. And then they started backing it up by militarizing coral reefs in the South China Sea and interdicting like fishermen. They claimed all the fishing and mineral rights and gas and oil rights in the South China Sea. This created a lot of tension. It's still ongoing. But if you want to think about this, the American expansion started westward, really from our American Revolution 250 years ago to the West Coast, on to Hawaii, and then during World War II, and at the end of World War II in 1949, we reached all the way to the border of China. We controlled the whole entire Pacific. It was an American lake. And the Chinese now are pushing back slowly, methodically against that. That's what's going on. And they have made a lot of progress. I think all of a sudden you don't hear the complaints about these militarized coral reefs. There's constant skirmishes between the Philippines and the Chinese. They're very, very nervous about that. And they've invited our country to set up military bases in the Philippines. And the Philippines is only about 100 miles from Taiwan. So we have military bases right here. It's been set up in the last 2 years. Meanwhile, there's a second island chain that goes all the way to Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands. And the Chinese are making overtures that this is their sphere of influence. Okay? So this is what you're going to see over the next couple of years as they push out to the second island chain. But this definitely, a geopolitical trend that's ongoing. How do we respond? Well, to this, the Biden administration probably had the most comprehensive response. They set up a series of alliances with various countries to stand up to China. And Biden and company did it fairly quickly. And you can see here, with India, they set up an alliance. I showed this slide last year, I think. And with Vietnam, with Korea and Japan, with the Philippines, and with the Pacific Islands. They set up these alliance agreements really against the Chinese. So the Chinese didn't like that. Now, as far as I know, Trump has not dismantled this, but I don't think he's nurtured it. He's certainly not emphasized it, but I think this is still in place. I don't know how committed we are to it at this time. We have other problems right now, as you may be aware. And finally, there was an alliance set up with Australia. The Australians were very concerned, especially because the Pacific Islands are their area of influence, their sphere of influence, and they saw Chinese trying to win all these countries' loyalty by making very generous loans to these countries, and Australia was having trouble competing with them. And so they became really worried about China, and there was a lot of economic struggles between Australia and China. China banned import of all Australian wine into China and other agricultural products. So they really were putting a lot of pressure on Australia. Well, the response was interesting. It was called AUKUS. Have you heard about AUKUS? Has anybody heard of that? I hope you have, because I talked about it last year. So it's a little trick question there. Okay. AUKUS is Australia, United Kingdom, United States. This is an agreement that really shook the Chinese up. The deal was we agreed, we in the UK own the technology for nuclear submarines, and we agreed to give the technology to the Australians to make their own nuclear submarines in Australia that could be deployed in the Asia Pacific. And what this graph tries to show you is the number of days a nuclear submarine can remain off the coast of China submerged with nuclear missiles on board. So it's a real counter threat to everything they're doing. This really shook up Xi Jinping. I saw pictures of him right after that. I really think this really got to him. It's really a brilliant stroke. As far as I know, this treaty has still survived the new administration, and it's going ahead. So these will be deployed in the next couple of years. So it's a counterweight to what China is doing as they assert their area. And it's really this contested is what's happening with that second island chain. Australia would like them to stay within the first island chain, because they don't want them too close to their territory. So that's, again, this geopolitical struggle for various spheres of influence. Meanwhile, the Chinese, we put pressure on the Chinese, we put pressure on the Russians, and so the enemy, my enemy is my friend, something like that. So all of a sudden, the Chinese and Russians, who normally get along very well, are cooperating strategically, and they made a pass where a mission of Chinese and Russian aircraft, military aircraft, went through the American ADIZ. ADIZ stands for Air Defense Identification Zone. Every country has a zone where they claim it's their airspace, If you enter, you got to identify yourself. So they went in unannounced, and were intercepted by the North American Air Defense Command. So this is really just a warning bell that, you know, we do this all the time to them, that they're going to do it to us. And the book, this is another chart from the book, and the book shows how that these are original multilateral and bilateral exercises between China and Russia before 2015, 05 to 15, and then 16 to 23. So you can see there's a lot more of these exercises of cooperation, testing our American defenses in the Pacific. This is very threatening to our military planners of what's going to happen in the Pacific. And I've given these talks. I've met grandparents like me whose kids are in the military and they're out in the Pacific. They're all training for what to do with how to defend the United States against the Chinese attack in the Pacific. This shows how unbalanced our military strength is against the Chinese in the Pacific. Now, this map shows all the Chinese capability in airplanes, all the Chinese capability in Navy, ships, and submarines, and missiles, versus what we have in the Pacific. Meanwhile, we recently, as you know, diverted quite a few of our resources to the Persian Gulf, for whatever exercise we're doing down there. Now, you got to be a little careful because some of this stuff is really old aircraft that's not in the same capability as our aircraft, but the Chinese are very rapidly modernizing their military. And our military is very, very concerned about it, so they're trying to get $4.68 billion for new Pacific deterrence initiatives. This is a very serious issue. My doctor's husband is in the reserves, and he's been living in Pearl Harbor, where he's an Army officer preparing for war with China. So the world is changing. So we're struggling over these military spheres of influence. So let's see, that was there. Okay, so that was the second part of my talk, of what I was going to bring up. The third was Taiwan. That's the third area where we have tension between the United States and China. And you can see here, come on, I want to go back to this Shanghai communique. We talked about this before. This is a masterpiece in diplomatic wording. In 1972, Henry Kissinger, the formidable Foreign Secretary of State and National Security Advisor to Richard Nixon, was in China, and he negotiated with Zhou Enlai this agreement for what's called the One China policy. And this agreement exists to this day. And I think it's important to review this, because the Chinese say they're abiding by it, we say we're abiding by it, and neither one of us is happy. So what's going on? China's position is called the One China policy, is that Taiwan is China's internal affair, and no other country has the right to interfere. That's what's in the agreement. The Chinese like that. And we agree. Taiwan is China's internal affair, and we have no business telling the Chinese what to do about Taiwan. It'd be like Wisconsin is part of the United States. So China would not negotiate with Tony Evers, they would negotiate with President Trump. Okay, that's the One China policy. We agreed to that. So the second part of the agreement is what's called constructive ambiguity or strategic ambiguity. This is right out of the agreement. All Chinese on either side of the Taiwan Strait maintain there's but one China, and Taiwan is part of China. So it's, again, what's called the One China policy. We agreed to that, and the Chinese keep reminding us of that. But it affirms the United States' interest in a peaceful settlement of the Taiwan questions by the Chinese themselves. We said to China, okay, we agree to this. You guys got to work this out without blowing each other up. You can't have a war. So that's where we're at. We're saying that it's got to be peaceful reunification, not a military force for unification. The Taiwan people flirted with rejoining China and not rejoining China after all the problems between Hong Kong and China, when Hong Kong was originally set up as one country, two systems, and the Chinese have reneged on all those agreements. The Taiwan people don't really trust the Chinese to have reunification. This has led to a lot of internal division in Taiwan. Now, this is a picture of the leadership in Taiwan, starting with the original leader, Chiang Kai-shek. The Chinese call him Zhang Jie-shi. He was the leader of the Kuomintang. This is the National Party of China, and this is their symbol. This goes back to like 1920, something like that. This was the party that originally the communists and nationalists were united in this party to build one China, and they eventually split and led to a civil war. Chiang Kai-shek lost the civil war. He went to Taiwan around 1947 and set up the national government in Taiwan. The key point is, though, his position of the Kuomintang, the Blue Party, was that they believed that there was only one China, that Kuomintang, the Blue Party, should rule China, and Chiang Kai-shek fully planned to return to China as a leader of united China and leave Taiwan. He never was able to do that, but that was his position. And over the years, the Chinese and the communists and the nationalists they liked that agreement because they wanted one China policy. But Taiwan politics started changing, and where are we? So Chiang's son was in charge from 78 to 88. Both these guys were born on the Zhongjing Kuo. He was born on Kuo. He was born on the mainland. And the first president of Taiwan from 1988 to 2000 was Lee Teng-hui. He was the first Taiwan leader that was born in Taiwan. A lot of the tensions that exist in Taiwan, and there's a lot of tensions, we've talked about some of these in my prior talks, is that the mainlanders are calling the shots in Taiwan. In other words, the people that were born in the mainland, not the Taiwan people. There's a lot of tension between the two groups. Those that were born in Taiwan and maybe don't have the same heritage as the ones that came there during the Civil War around 1949, 1950. So Lee prepared the way for a democratic transition in Taiwan, and he's still highly venerated for that. And who gets elected but this guy, Chen Shui-bian, and he was a ruler from 2000 to 2008. That was the beginning of he was the first leader of the Democratic Progressive Party. And the Chinese were furious because the party platform was that Taiwan is not part of China. Taiwan is different than China. They changed all the textbooks to create a new alternative history for Taiwan. And Taiwan people grew up believing the children grew up believing they were a separate country. And this infuriated the Chinese. Briefly, the Kuomintang came back in power in 2008 to 2016, but after the problems in Hong Kong, that led the way for more DPP leaders. Tsai Ing-wen, she was a real firebrand. She's the one that Nancy Pelosi visited in Taiwan some years ago. And most recently, the current leader of Taiwan is a guy named Lai Ching-te, and he goes by the English name William Lai. He is the current leader. A lot of these guys are U.S. educated. I think William Lai was educated at Cornell. I know Lee was educated at Cornell. They produced a lot of the Chinese leaders. Well, when he came to power, again talking about Taiwan as an independent country, the Chinese were furious. And all we would have to do to start a war is change the name of Taiwan from the Republic of China, simple name change, and call it the Republic of Taiwan. That would ignite a war between China and Taiwan, just that simple event. So as soon as he was elected, Lai was elected, the Chinese really put military pressure on Taiwan. The incursions in their air defense zone increased to over 300 per month, double the average of the past years. And this is a map of different places where the Chinese at different times have had all kinds of military exercises around Taiwan. and simulating a blockade to send them the message, you know, you're part of China, don't plan on running away. This is the source of tension between China and Taiwan and the United States. Our Congress has been the biggest backers of the Republic of China. Many, many people originally were there. Over the years, I think some of that support has eroded, but especially in the Republican Party, there's been really deep support for Taiwan and for an independent Taiwan. So Taiwan is playing a game walking between the Chinese and the Americans to stay independent of China. China increased their patrols near Kinmen. Kinmen is an island off the coast of Xiamen, Fujian province. We talked about that last year. It's right within eyesight. You can see Kinmen from Xiamen, and it's actually, but it's Taiwan territory, and the Chinese have left it that way so they can use it as a way to demonstrate their displeasure with Taiwan. So they put a lot more pressure on them. My employees, when they went home from Shanghai to Taiwan, would often fly to Xiamen in China, take a ferry to Kinmen, and then take a domestic flight to Taipei. It was cheaper than going any other way. So it's an interesting part of the relations between the two islands. I don't, you know, they're brothers and sisters. I don't think the average Taiwan person does not want to fight with China. They're the same but different. So I don't think any of these people are looking for a war, even though I talk about all this tension. I don't think they're looking for a war. They had live fire exercises, all just to demonstrate their displeasure with William Lai's government. And we are walking a tightrope. We keep arming Taiwan. The Chinese do not like this. So we had the Taiwan Security Initiative in 2025. That's last year, not too long ago. Trump signed a bill for $1.4 billion for the Taiwan defense. And as I said, the Congress, our Congress, especially on the Republican side, is very strongly pro-Taiwan. I don't expect that to change. Trump met with Xi last October at the APEC summit. So it's an economic summit, Asia Pacific Economic Council. He met with them in Busan, Korea in October 2025, and they had like a 90-minute meeting. And I think that was the beginning of coming to a tacit agreement between the two countries on the economic and military issues. China warned us recently that if Washington goes ahead with a new package, which is being contemplated for the spring, a new arms package for Taiwan, that they will cancel Trump's summit. Trump's supposed to go to China, I think it's March 28th through April 2nd, for a state visit to China. And both countries are looking forward to this, hoping to resolve these three issues I talked about, or make improvements in these three areas. Xi told Trump at APEC, if you sell more stuff, your invitation is canceled. And Trump very badly wants to go. Now, how this will change the result of the Persian Gulf War, I don't know. So we're back to these three key points between our countries: economic trade imbalances, military spheres of influence, and Taiwan. The trade imbalance still hasn't gone away. This is another graph showing the same thing. This is U.S. imports from China. This is U.S. exports to China, and this is negative numbers. This is our trade imbalance. It's improved a little bit in the last 6 months, but it's still huge. So it's still a big problem. So how are we going to solve this? Well, I think you're already seeing signs that the tension between China and the United States is greatly reduced since Trump announced those tariffs last April. There was a Chinese cyber attack on our government and the Congress system. They infiltrated the congressional email system. There are all kinds of plans to punish the Chinese for that. And the U.S. also announced that they're going to halt, this is in December last year, we're going to halt plans to sanction the Chinese spy agency that was responsible for this huge hack of the American internal system. They really done a pretty good job penetrating our computer systems. So why did we do this? So Donald Trump is sacrificing national security to maintain a trade truce. So this trade, getting these rare earth minerals that are being traded for other issues, other concessions, like going after this agency that did the cyber attack. TikTok, is that really a separate event? We know TikTok, that the United States eventually agreed to make a deal and allow TikTok to exist, to survive and exist in the United States. Why did they do that? All the rhetoric about how bad TikTok was, and all of a sudden they're in the United States. Why? I'll give you my opinion in a second, but I'll just leave you with that question. NVIDIA, we put a complete ban on selling NVIDIA. These are the chips that are used for the artificial intelligence, complete ban on selling, exporting their chips to China. And all of a sudden, we allowed NVIDIA to export their less powerful chip, the H200, to China. And the Chinese don't like that. They would like the most advanced technology. But we blocked them from doing it, and we required NVIDIA to pay the U.S. government 25%. Everything has a tax for our president. So, but the point is, we backed off from our extreme position on all these issues. One by one, we backed down. Finally, William Lai wanted to make a trip. I think Taiwan only has relationships with one or two other countries, and they're in South. One of them is in Central America. He wanted to visit them, or he wanted to transit through the United States. But he is like, it would be like if Tony Evers wanted to transit through China as a government leader. They would not allow this. So Lai is just like a governor. He's not a president of a country, so we would not allow him to transit through the United States for his international trip on the route. And that was to signal that he's not the leader of an independent country. He's a local official. So that was a major concession to the Chinese. Occasionally we have allowed that, and that really infuriates the Chinese because there's only one China. There's not two Chinas. And one China can only have one president. It's not William Lai, it's Xi Jinping. So as I went through this, suddenly kind of slow in my thinking, but suddenly I realized I was putting all these updating from this book to what's going on in the last couple of months, and suddenly I was realizing these are the elements of a deal. Suddenly I think I see what's happening. I'm kind of slow, but let me know if you agree with me. I think that China will open up sales of rare earth minerals to us. They already have to some extent. I think China has not started buying U.S. soybeans and other agricultural products, but I predict they will after Trump's summit in April, if indeed he gets to go there. Hope he gets the food as good as I got. And I think that they're going to further crack down on fentanyl. I don't really understand this fentanyl thing, but apparently we allege that China makes fentanyl, which is exported to Mexico, and the cartels use this to make cocaine and other illicit drugs. So whatever they're doing, I predict they're going to crack down more. And the United States has what's called a national defense security policy, and it calls to erect a strong denial defense. This is just published along the first island chain, which includes Japan, Taiwan, and Philippines. I guess the question I ask is, how aggressive are we going to be in enforcing this national defense policy? I'm not sure we're going to be as aggressive as the wording says. U.S. will sell chips to China, the NVIDIA chips, and I believe they'll probably sell the more advanced chip before it's over for this use in artificial intelligence. I think we'll slow armament sales to China, to Taiwan, I mean. I think TikTok will continue to operate in the United States. U.S. will slow tariffs on Chinese goods, and we won't sanction all their cyber mischief. So I think that's how it's shaping up, the concessions on each side. Right or wrong, whatever, I think this is what's happening. And we won't let any of their leaders come to the United States on any kind of official visit to the United States. They have to come as a private citizen. So if he wants to go to his reunion at Cornell, he has to come as a private citizen, not as the president of Taiwan. But this agreement, if they do this, and we have a peaceful situation for a while, it still doesn't solve U.S. competitiveness issue. So what are we going to do? They're still expanding their production. They're more efficient in production, great products, low costs, and they're just running circles around us and around the world. So the surplus is likely, to reach the level where the world reached a $1 trillion surplus between what China's buying from the world and what China's exporting to the world. These are all recent stuff from the Financial Times. This one's December 8th, 2025. So, but here's a question. We have a lot of data centers. I understand there's some data centers going in Wisconsin. Has anybody heard about this? I think it's big news. Here's the question. What if the AI race isn't about chips at all? I just kind of stumbled into this. This is November 11th, 2025, this article, and I thought, what if it's not about AI chips? What else is it about? Energy. So I hear energy, electricity. Xi Jinping, from the minute he became in power in China, he really stepped on the gas in China's electrification program. I went there. I moved there in 2005. I first went there in 95. I went there a lot between 95 and 05, and then I got asked to move there. And during this time, this massive, massive construction of the electrical grid, like nothing like we have in this country. Look at these statistics that I just dug out of the Financial Times. The installed generation capacity in the United States is 1,373 gigawatts. Gigawatt is 1,000,000 megawatts. So it's just a unit that we power engineers use. Now, we also have generation in Canada, a lot of generation that we import power, but this is only power that's generated in the United States. Since 2021, China has installed 1,500 gigawatts. That's more than our total installed base. And the total Chinese installed base is 3,891 gigawatts. So China is an electrical nation. They have the huge power in huge leverage in running these data centers and everything else that consumes electricity is the core of any economy today. And we have really fumbled with how to do it. First we want nuclear, then we don't want nuclear. Then we're going to have a alternative energy economy, green energy, we're going to have wind farms, and then our current president says, I don't like wind farms. He tried to cancel all the wind farms that Biden had licensed in New England. So we don't have a consistent energy policy. Meanwhile, look what's happening. We're falling further and further behind. And so Xi Jinping really stepped on the gas on the Chinese energy revolution. And this gives them a really strong position against us in any trade war. Because electricity is the foundation of manufacturing. Well, I know a little bit about the energy industry. This is a picture of me in 2008 in China at the Hunyuan 500,000 volt series capacitor project that we built. And I was there for the commissioning. I really enjoyed being with these Chinese engineers. It was a lot of fun. I was very proud of the work that our team did building this. This was a project put in place in Shanghai province to bring power from Mongolia to Beijing during the Olympics. Was it 2007 or 2008 they had the Olympics in Beijing? And the Chinese wanted to have blue skies in the Olympics, so they turned off all the coal generating plants in Beijing so there'd be blue sky, and they brought the power in from Mongolia. And this equipment that my team supplied made that possible. And then the Chinese learned how to do it from us. That's the story. Of course, we were able to continue in the market through various maneuvering, but anyway, that's a different story. This is a massive project. This was the largest installation of its type in the world that we built. And if you look here, China paces ahead of electrification of the rest of the world. They're up to 30% of their energy is electricity. And look what's going on with the United States and Europe. We are basically flatlined. So the electric economy. When I first started out, I worked at Westinghouse, and they were talking about the nuclear electric economy. It was all going to be electric, and that fell apart with all the problems with nuclear power. But the Chinese have really done it. They've moved their country into a very electric world. And I'll just show you one example from this article I read. These are all solar installations. Now, if you know anything about the geography of China, this is all basically a pretty desert country. You couldn't find a better geography to put in solar panels to collect electricity. The trouble is, this electricity is generated here. It's all desert here. It's all consumed down in here. So how do you get it from one place to the other? Well, you call in Cooper Power Systems to help you. And my guys did this project right as I was leaving China. This is the largest ultra-high voltage capacitor bank in the world. It's part of an ultra-high voltage direct current transmission project. It takes power from Xinjiang to Shanghai and Guangzhou on the coastal part of China. This is 1.1 million volts from Earth, from the transmission lines to Earth. Massive project. So I wanted to kind of stop here and I have 3 questions for you. We're doing pretty good, about what I thought we'd be. Wanted to not take up all the whole time here, me talking. I want to ask you guys some questions. These are done. I made these questions up myself to be a little provocative. They're not out of the book. So China loans us a lot of money by purchasing our treasury notes. They're the biggest. What did I just do? Whoops. They're the biggest buyer of American treasury notes. If they stop buying our treasury notes, we're going to go bankrupt. It's that simple. So if they buy our treasury notes, they keep us afloat, and we in turn turn around and buy their products and keep their factories afloat and their population from rebelling. So everybody's happy. Why should we, what's wrong with that? Maybe we should continue enjoying our nice easy life with these inexpensive, high quality products and let them buy our debt. What's wrong with that? I don't know the answer to that, but I'm just posing this as a question, a little provocatively, but I think it's true. Second, we have the Monroe Doctrine. We just enforced it in Venezuela. We said this is our territory. In Panama, when Trump took over, there's a Chinese investment in the Panama Canal. We made them turn it over to the United States. It was a Hong Kong investment. And then all this business with what's going on in Greenland. We have our sphere of influence. So what's wrong with China having their sphere of influence in the South China Sea? Now, don't report me to the FBI or anything for asking these questions. But I'm just posing this as a question. Fair is fair. And finally, on Taiwan, the main thing we in China both want on Taiwan is their chips. All these NVIDIA chips are made in Taiwan. They may be designed in the United States, but they're made in Taiwan. So as long as we have access to this advanced semiconductor technology, what do we care what happens to Taiwan? So that's my 3 questions for you. Be interested to hear what you all have to say.
I can pass the microphone around, kind of helps with people hearing.
I'd like to ask you a question about the first one because you used the term, we enjoy the good life. And you were showing, I guess my question is, if you look at the productivity of American workers, and as far as increased standard of living, the old theory was that as workers become more productive, standard of living would increase. And that's not what happened in the United States. And I suspect because of deflation, the same thing is happening in China, that despite increasing productivity, standard of living, I mean, it may have increased, but nowhere near what it could have. So I guess, do you have any idea what the difference is between United States workers and Chinese workers in terms of productivity and living standards?
I had lots of data on it, but I didn't bring it with me. I had a great chart showing how the gross domestic product per person in China has increased from a really small number over the last 20 years to a really big number. That's nowhere, it's a fraction of what the equivalent benefit of what we have in the United States. We definitely have a much higher standard of living. And I can just test from living there that they work really hard. They work 7 days a week, 24/7. I think my partner slept with their iPhones under their pillow. They were always available. The workers, it's just a culture based on everybody working really hard. So as far as productivity goes, that also is tied to what kind of manufacturing investment there is, which is really what boosts the productivities of the factories and workers.
So I guess in theory, if we stop buying their products and if China can't replace us, they would have a huge civil unrest.
They would. That's their worry. That's a really good point, Greg. That's their worry. They're worried, and they've had that. You know, they've had strikes in China. I witnessed a couple strikes. They're actually quite militant. They're not peaceful like our strikes. If we take away this, their fear is that Xi Jinping's basic commitment to the Communist Party. You support us, and we'll provide an ever better living standard to you. And that's the basic Marxist agreement between the people of the Communist Party and the people of China. There's a great documentary on Netflix, I think it's still there, I don't know, I assume it's still there, called American Factory. If you have Netflix, go home and watch it. It was made around 2015. I know that because we supplied all the electrical equipment for this factory in Dayton, Ohio. We, my group in China, Eaton Corporation, was involved. Was involved in this equipment that went into this factory, and it goes into the social relationships between American workers and Chinese workers, and it really explored deeply the different philosophies of working with each other. So I really recommend you watch American Factory if you want to really understand the differences. I think they've talked about unions. In China, the Communist Party is a union, and their view is they work to help management succeed so that the people they will build a more modern, better China. That's the pitch. We will build China into a more modern country, because they all have a direct memory when things were really poor. I showed you those pictures at the beginning. Life was really tough 30 years ago. It's much better today. It's not great. We all live in tiny apartments crammed together, but it's better than it was.
I think you can hear me.
Yes.
In the beginning, you referenced a company in South Milwaukee.
Yes.
Having been born and raised in South Milwaukee, might that be the Cyrus series?
Your question was that the Cyrus series?
Yes.
No, that was Cooper Power Systems, the old Kyle plant.
Oh, the Kyle plant.
Yeah, what's the address? I have a Kyle plant representative here to keep me honest. What's the address?
9th Avenue, 9th and Marion, 2800 South 9th
Okay.
Street.
All right. I just heard South Milwaukee, and I just couldn't.
That business, the business we originally tried to set up really did not succeed. We
Okay.
transformed because the products were American products, and that's different than what's used in China. But by the time I left, we transformed it into a very successful factory making products for the China market and also exporting from Pingdingshan all the way to Europe. We were big suppliers in the Middle East for electrical equipment
Yes.
made to international standards.
And you referenced that because the Cyrus series is mining primarily.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
That's the foundation.
Yeah,
And
another
then
great
in
company.
2011, they became Caterpillar.
Yep,
Okay, thank you.
my pleasure. Yes,
Can I go off the base just a little bit?
okay.
And the other side of China, I was just reading an article that described Russia as being basically owned by China right now because of how much they're financing the war in Ukraine.
Mhm.
Could you touch on that for just a minute? I know it's late in the day.
I don't have any hard statistics, but even during the time I was there, when we put sanctions on Russia, early Ukraine invasion, the Chinese extracted a really good deal from the Russians to buy natural gas from Russia at really below market prices. And I think they did that again with all the recent troubles. So the Russians really pushed the Chinese around in the early 1950s. And the Chinese are just glad to shove it back at the Russians. There's no love lost between the two. I don't really fear an alliance between China and Russia. It would be at best temporary. So I don't know if I can help. I don't have any statistics to show you who owns who what.
I was just curious what you thought of the relationship and how it was working. And I think that was kind of what they were saying in the journal as well.
It's kind of opportunistic on both sides, but the Chinese really stick it to the Russians when they can. And they would, all my employees, I became very close with these people. We all worked together for 10 years. And they saw me as one of them. So they would delight in telling me how they screwed the Russians on this deal or that deal.
I don't need the microphone, I'll just.
You mentioned that folks in Taiwan feel like brothers and sisters with China.
Yes.
One parallel and a potential parallel to Ukraine and Russia. People of Ukraine, many of them and many Russians, but probably felt like, well, they did feel like brother and sister as well. However, Putin and his cronies felt like to leave their legacy, and because Russia is a big, important country, they needed to invade Ukraine. Does Xi Jinping have the same kind of tendency, might he, as he closes to the end of his life, feel like he needs to leave a legacy and do something with Taiwan?
I think the answer to that is yes. My colleagues, they always interpret Chinese politics for me. They told me that they believe from the beginning that Xi saw reunification with Taiwan as his lasting legacy. This is what he would like more than anything else to achieve. Again, these guys came, the history is a very interesting history between the Communist Party and the Nationalist Party. Nationalist is what I call the Kuomintang, that's the Chinese name for it. It's National Party in Chinese. And they all originally started together as revolutionaries against the Emperor of China. And then they split over, Chiang Kai-shek turned on the communists, massacred them in Shanghai in the late 1920s. And the Civil War erupted. And eventually, after World War II, the communists won the Civil War. But the Civil War is incomplete because the nationalist government retreated to Taiwan. Our Navy stopped the communists from completing their victory in the Civil War. It's an unresolved issue, much like Korea is still an unresolved issue because of our interference. National reunification did not occur in both countries. On the other hand, Vietnam achieved national reunification. It turned out it wasn't a threat to us we thought it would be. Vietnam is just a prosperous country now, and lots of people are going there. I think Osher just had a trip to Vietnam. So we spent a lot of time in Vietnam. It became a very prosperous country, not a political threat to the United States. So these, unfortunately, sadly, for the people of China and the people of Korea, these issues are unresolved. They're a legacy of the Cold War.
Yes, about the power grid,
Pardon me?
how the gigawatts that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, just to give you an idea of gigawatts, I should have completed my thought. The data centers in Port Washington is 3 gigawatts. And I think the one down in Racine is about, or Kenosha, wherever it is going to be around the same thing. I mean, we're talking about maybe 10 gigawatts of power going into Wisconsin for these data centers. That's a lot of power, a whole lot.
Okay, but when you show those statistics, it looks like they're making 3 times as many gigawatts as we are.
Yes.
But don't they have like 4 or 5 times as many people? Is that, do the people use it, or is it all?
I think it's going into industrial. Yeah, people use it, air conditioning. They still ration, at least when I was there, they were still rationing power in the summertime in Shanghai. They'd have rolling blackouts.
Now, you mentioned the solar power. Do you know what percentage of those gigawatts is from the solar
I
power?
should have done that, but I don't know.
It's kind of interesting. It's quite a big area.
Yeah, renewables. Yeah, they put a lot of, they're the leaders in renewables. One of my former employees ended up going to be as a commercial leader of a solar panel company. That's the big export focus of China is exporting renewable energy products, wind turbines and solar panels to the rest of the world. That's part of why they're leading it, because that's where the business is, and we walked away from it. It's really terrible. We have lost the ability to export that kind of technology, which used to be our forte. We've just become very introverted, in my opinion. I think it's really sad. It's going to be worrying for our children. It's my prediction.
On the first point up there, I know that China, like 2 or 3 weeks ago, on the treasuries, they instructed all their banks not to have U.S. treasuries anymore. They want them to cut back because of the risks that they see in the market. Also, I know they've cut their maturities, and I believe they've cut their ownership of treasuries percentage-wise as well. And on Taiwan Semiconductor, they built a plant in the Phoenix area.
Yes.
And China needs Taiwan Semiconductor just like we do. So
yes.
That's a good point to keep Taiwan until they can build a competitive plant in their own country. I think Taiwan Semiconductor is going to help Taiwan's chances.
And that's
of staying alive.
very precise technology. It's very difficult to duplicate that. I think the Phoenix plant is not anywhere near as productive as what they have in Taiwan. It's really advanced process technology. So this Taiwan's ACE card. All that technology came out of America, came out of a company called Fairchild Semiconductor. All the people that started Intel and TSMC and others used to work for Fairchild. They all know each other from Fairchild. Morris Chang is the head of Taiwan Semiconductor. He's probably in his 80s now. He started out with Andy Grove of Intel, all at Fairchild.
The thing I struggle with in relation to China and other Asian countries as well is the basic perspective of life, their philosophical beliefs, their cultural background is dramatically different than the US. I mean, we are 50 individual states pretending to be a country. China is basically bound together by thousands of years of belief systems. And I think as I look at the current situation and how that meshes with that struggle I have mentally trying to put the two countries together, is China, we operate on a notion that every 4 years we have the opportunity to have an election, and if we don't like how the country is being led, we can vote the guys out, the people out. China operates on a very long view. They may have changes in who is at the top, but the actual beliefs and their perspectives on the world and their place in the world is literally based on decades and decades and decades of what they actually want. So as I look at the current situation and even those questions and your experience in China, how do they think about the fact that what is going on right now with this particular president will end in 3 years? How does that influence what those agreements are?
So your question is, how do they feel about the Trump administration and the previous Biden administration?
Any administration. I mean, as they make agreements with us or have real conflicts with us, what is the perspective of the individuals that you've gotten acquainted with in China about?
The people during the time I was living there was the Obama period, was George Bush and then Obama, and their viewpoint was the Democratic Party and the Republican Party were all the same, just minor changes. They just figured they'd outlast us. They would say to me an ancient Chinese idiom, which is when you look up in the sky at the crows, all the crows are black. Tian Sha Wu Ya Iban He. All the crows are black. That's the idiom they told me. And that's to say that there's no difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. That was their viewpoint at that time. So they were fascinated with Trump. When Trump won the election first time, I had my partners, just retired, my partners came to visit me. I took them to New York and went to Trump Tower the eve of the election. There was all these demonstrations there. It was really wild. It was right before, the election was the next day. And they were just, amazed by seeing that public, most of the people were outside demonstrating against Trump. This is right before he became elected the first time. And they were fascinated by the whole thing. Then I took them to the Statue of Liberty. So, I don't know, they're fascinated with America. There's a great respect for America. That may have changed. I still feel that they're going to rebuild China into its greatness. I mean, they're not comparing themselves to us. They're comparing themselves to the glory of past Chinese empires, and they feel they're going to rebuild into a new China. You hear that a lot, talking about a new China. That's their goal. How am I doing, John? This is my friend John Leo.
Good talk. Thank you. I had this book. The title is 1493.
1493, yes.
Yeah, the Columbus Exchange. So in that book, there's a little story about like some Chinese immigrant in Mexico competing with the Hispanic local. Yeah. They already colonized the location.
Right.
And the Hispanic are in no competition, just like U.S. versus China now. They cannot compete with the China. Okay, and this made me think, I don't know anybody agree with me, is that you look at the whole East Asia, like Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, these four tigers, and the example of early China's before they opened up, and now it's China. They had this tradition of competing. If they had the level playing field, they will win. And my observation. Okay, I don't know. I connect this to history.
Yeah.
So the other big thing is because the U.S. dollar is the reserve currency, And we are destined to buy up because we hold the currency. And everything else is so cheap, we buy from them.
Yeah.
So that gutting our industry. And Trump doesn't address that. No politician can address that.
Yep.
So I think that's the big background that I don't think the US can overcome. The result would be we come down, meet that. That's my take.
So what he's saying is the U.S. is a reserve currency. The Chinese fix their exchange rate of the renminbi, that's their Chinese yuan. We fix it to the U.S. currency. When I first went there, it was 8.3 to $1, and now it's like 6 point. What is it now? The exchange rate, seven to $1. They fix that currency to the U.S. dollar, but the Chinese yuan is not convertible, whereas you can't go to a bank and exchange it for euros. So it's not used in international trade. They're starting to do it more with the Belt and Road initiative to use it for, Chinese loans in Chinese renminbi, Chinese yuan that can be used in exchange for Chinese products. But it's not a global reserve currency like the US dollar. That's probably one of our big strengths for now. I don't know how long it'll last, but that's without that our big strength. The other thing, I'll just say this, my employees, and I became very good friends with many. I still hear from most of them weekly. I hear from somebody in China. They're struggling to feed their families, educate their children, do their jobs, and they don't really like their government. And during the COVID thing, that almost broke out in open rebellion. My secretary was sending me messages on WeChat. That's a texting app, complaining about Xi Jinping and putting it all in there in writing. I finally told her to go to bed and don't do that because I didn't want to get her in trouble. But they were banging pots and protests during the zero COVID era. They don't really like their leaders. I have some other slides that I was going to show you about corruption in China, but I don't think we have time tonight. But they deeply resent the corruption of the Chinese party, and some people are living a lot better than they are. As far as Xi Jinping being a president for life, they don't like that. They remember what happened under Mao. And they're fearful that it'll happen again. So all is not well underneath the surface in China. That's what I would say. And I think most dynasties end in violent chaos in China. And certainly we're living in the period of the Communist Party dynasty. Before that was the Qing dynasty. So each dynasty ends in violence, revolution, and civil war and chaos. And that could break out very quickly in China. So I don't think things are stable as they appear. And that's what Xi's worry is. His biggest worry is if the economy stumbles, then people like my secretary aren't going to be very happy. They're going to be complaining. Right now, he's providing an ever better improvement in their living standard. So that's how I say it. John, what do you think?
On this Taiwan thing, I asked, I visited China, asked my colleagues why they had not invaded China because they built up the military for so long.
Yep.
And I think the calculation is they worry about if they cannot win in a big short time, they
that would destabilize China.
They will lose the power.
If they fail if they attack Taiwan and they fail, that'll be the end of Xi Jinping's government. So with it is, and this is very Chinese. There's lots of maneuvering but no actual fighting. So I think he would like to pressure Taiwan into some kind of concession. But I don't really expect, unless someone makes a mistake, which can always happen, an eruption of violence.
But on the issue of Taiwan, China, one thing that I don't understand, maybe I'm too naive, is why there's no peacemaker in between.
Right? A peacemaker where?
A peacemaker, like Henry Kissinger.
Oh.
A go-between person that resolve this tension.
We have Donald Trump. He just got he's going to get the Nobel Peace Prize.
He's too busy right now.
He's going to make peace next month. Watch the next big event is this, if it occurs, which I think it probably will, unless something terrible happens in Iran. Trump and Xi will have a multi-day summit in China. Watch what happens there. See if any of my predictions come true.
Also, Trump's card just increased after like Venezuela and and Iran. He
Yeah.
hold more car now.
He's
Yes.
what?
A little bit more car. He's living in
More
he
com-
increases.
More confident.
He increases
Yeah,
quite a
and
bit.
maybe he's
Very
over-
confident.
More cards in his hand.
More
card.
cars in his hand.
I see. Okay.
Just like recent event.
So you know that China was buying oil from Venezuela. So now we're trying to cut that off.
Yep.
You can buy the market price. That's what Trump said.
What was the question?
Well, I was just gonna say that, we need China, and China needs us.
Yes.
That's the bottom line. And I can see this, when the tariffs were put on, all the dollar stores were empty. Now I'm going to the dollar stores, and there's so many boxes in the aisle that I can't even get the cart through it. And a lot of stuff is coming from Australia, Pakistan, South Africa now, but predominantly it's China. So I think these tariffs are gonna go up and down until it gets to the right mix. And we're just gonna have to let it develop on its own. And as far as Taiwan, if that agreement was put in place such a long time ago, we have to let that stand. And I wouldn't be surprised if Trump is trying to work out some kind of a friendship between those two countries. Because we both buy from Taiwan, as far as I know. So we don't want to lose that either.
Right.
And there's going to be no big war. I don't think, we have to worry about that because China doesn't want a war either. I wouldn't be surprised right now if Trump is on the phone talking to both China and Russia while all this is going on currently, because he wants to keep a line open with these other leaders. He's not going to just drop it and ignore it. He wants, I think, in my opinion, he kind of wants to get peace around the world, even if it's unconventional and very unorthodox to a lot of people. I just have faith that things are going to work out.
I'm with you. I agree.
And I think China is a fantastic country. I'd like
I
to go
recommend you
someday.
visit it. But if you really want to understand the life of a Chinese worker and their philosophy on work, and compare it to the life of an American worker and their philosophy on work, watch this documentary on Netflix, American Factory. You can remember that. And it's an award-winning documentary. It's 2 hours. And it's very, very insightful. I watched it 3 or 4 times.
Wow.
It's in Chinese and English. I mean, they have subtitles for the Chinese portion. But you see how these people think, and you see the big difference on their attitude towards working.
Okay, thanks for coming. Next week we'll be back. Thank you very much. Next week we'll be back with Dr. Beth Doherty from Beloit College, who will be speaking about foreign policy with Trump 2.0. So that'll be very interesting as well. Hope to see you then.